Welcome to the Wealthy Artist Podcast. And I'm your host, Sarah Clanton.
And I'm Wilson Harwood. And we're talking about how to develop your wealth,
enjoy financial freedom,
enjoy artistic freedom,
and live the life you've always imagined. Well, welcome to the Wealthy Artist Podcast. Wealthy artists listening, thank you for being here. Wilson, yay!
Woo! Yeah, thanks so much for being here, everybody. We love you all.
Yes.
If no one's told you that today, we have.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I just got an email. Did you get it? It said we have 750 downloads. And
really?
yes.
No,
so
cool.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much for listening. It's so cool to know that these conversations make it to your ears, and we love that you're here, and we hope it helps you. Please, leave us a message, write us a review, let us know how this podcast has helped you, maybe what you want to hear more of. Today we're talking about something that is not talked about enough, and so we're not afraid to dive into the icky, weird subjects. What are we talking about today, Wilson?
We're going to talk about failing and failures and failing hard, failing fast, failing slow.
Failing.
Everything to do with failing.
And how it happens to everyone.
Yeah. Because I think we're guilty of this. We try to pretend like we're freaking awesome on this podcast. But deep down, we have some dark stuff in our closets.
That's why we started talking to each other, and we needed support. We're like, oh my God, we feel like, we're drowning or whatnot. Help. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, and I think at this point I'm at this interesting place where I'm like, even when I'm drowning, so to speak, I'm just trying to be like, oh, nope, this is just all learning as you go. And so hopefully you guys can sort of commiserate with us and grow with us and not feel so alone maybe in your own failures. I don't know. People don't talk about failure that much.
Totally. And, we were talking right before we hopped on here today about a great video, which I will include in the description here, the show notes. Jack Conte, co-founder of Patreon, has this great, it's like 35 minutes, so worth it, so captivating. He talks about all his failures, and how many things he did before he got to the thing that worked. And it was just so awesome to hear about someone so fucking cool who considers himself a failure sometimes. I don't know, that's what? I don't see him that way, we idolize, we only see the highlight reel of some of the people we admire, but we don't see that stuff that it takes to get there. So yeah, highly recommend watching that perspective.
Yeah, Jack Conte's one of my heroes, so I'm definitely gonna watch that video. Sarah just sent it to me. But yeah, do you want to go start off, Sarah? We were thinking of just I was thinking chronologically, but you can just say whatever is on your mind, because you're the boss.
My first, because we're talking about in our career, failures in our career.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be relatable to this podcast, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, we talk about, I've got one, this one comes to mind, and it is personal and career-wise. And it is talking about self-worth. I made the mistake of, we talk about this too a lot, of thinking I needed something other than myself to do what I'm doing. And when I was in my 20s, full disclosure, I was married. I got divorced when I was 30 and I moved to Nashville. And, totally great guy. Actually, we were just living different lives, and, it just didn't work out, I think. And, it was to both of our disadvantage. I think I thought I needed to have I'm a musician, and that means that I don't have the ability to make a full-time living. I need a partner who has a quote normal job that can support me. And I think I got trapped into this thinking of I'm not able to do this on my own. Later discovering that maybe this isn't the right fit for me. And that was a whole nother oh my God, I'm a failure. I'm getting a divorce. So first it was the mindset. And not that it wasn't real. What is real? But it just it cascaded. I didn't learn it early on. So when I was in it and I discovered, oh shit, this isn't the right fit for me, and like everything inside of me needs to do this. And it's really scary to follow what you need to do, and you can feel like a failure in the process. But looking back, I'm really grateful, because it wasn't fair to either of us to stay in this situation. And but that definitely felt like a huge failure. But here I am, and I'm almost 7 years deep in Nashville. 6-7 years, I don't know.
Who's counting?
Who's counting? The pandemic has time all fucking weird. Crazy.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I don't know. In fact, side sort of story about this, I didn't actually even talk about this at all. Like I didn't tell anybody.
I didn't know about it for a long time.
Right. And actually it was at like one of my birthday parties. Yeah. At like Dee's Country Cocktail Lounge a couple years ago. And I was like telling someone about a friend who has been there for me through all this stuff, even for my divorce and through my divorce. And this guy was like, Sarah, I thought we were friends. Like I never knew that,
right.
you know, and I realized like I was keeping this hidden because I was ashamed of it and I felt like a failure, but it felt really good to just be like, oh, this is a part of my story. And I learned that, you know, if you don't follow your instincts and follow your gut and know you're worthy just as you are, like it's going to affect your career. It's going to affect your personal relationships. And, you know, anyway, so that's
a big one.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sure some people can relate to that too. Yeah. For me, I feel like one of the biggest failures, and it's not really a failure now that I look back on it, although at the time I really thought it was breaking up with my band of 5 years.
Oh my God.
In Colorado.
Yeah.
And we were, you know, a 7-piece band to start out with, which was crazy. And then we were a 6-piece band, and we formed right after college. And so it was like my dream to like build the band and go on tour and all this stuff. And I had all these expectations, all these aspirations, and we hustled so hard. We were practicing 2 to 3 times a week as a band at nights. And then we all did J jobs during the day. So I would teach music lessons and the other guys would do like construction jobs and things like that. So we were just working so hard, and then we would tour or / gig on the weekends, so like every Friday and Saturday night. So we were just like going, and we did it for 5 years straight, that schedule, pretty much nonstop.
Wow.
And we were just all exhausted, and then it just ended, and it was sort of like maybe what a divorce feels like. I've never done that.
I had a big band breakup too.
Lost it.
That was, you know, I was a duo, and we were touring together for 6 years. And like when you're in a car with someone for that long, like growing in different directions was, you know, we just wanted different things. And like even just having that conversation was like the hardest thing. Like definitely as hard, like same level hard. And that sounds maybe to those of maybe our listeners who haven't been through it or whatever, like what, crazy divorce and band breakup, like totally very similar. You probably spend more time with your bandmates than you do with your partners. Like,
potentially.
You know, pre-pandemic.
Definitely.
But yeah, I that one is really tough because you invest so much energy and you believe in it, right?
You believe in it. And this thing that I think we'll kind of keep touching on with all these failures is maybe expectations. Like the expectation we had, like I was like, oh, we're going to make it. We're going to like tour the country. We're going to be a successful band. And then to lose that, and you kind of lose your identity for a while too.
Oh yeah.
You know, which is interesting, which you probably lost your identity and lost expectations with your divorce.
Yeah. And band thing. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the band thing. So, but the success side, I think I got from that failure was being like, oh, I don't know if I necessarily want to do all that again. Like I didn't want to just start over, build a band again. So I knew like, okay, I'm not going to do that exact thing again. Like I had done that. There's no need to redo.
Right.
So I could move forward beyond it. But then I became a solo artist, and that's a whole nother story.
Totally. I did too. Touring with some other people too. But absolutely. I mean, I think it's if you can be brave enough to sit with that shitty feeling of band breakup and like, is this right? And so many great things can come from it. And that's hard to remember when you're in the thick of the shit. Like it's hard to remember that sometimes everything falls apart so it can fall together again. But those conversations are really hard. And if there is one thing that bands do, they all break up. But expectations can be really, really crazy. So talking about expectation on the front side, of things. Like I can think of sometimes like throughout my career where, oh, I should have made a contract. I should have had a written agreement. There's like little things like that you definitely learn from, you know, like, oh, I should have, you know, just made my boundaries in my business clearer on the front end. Like I've learned that on the other end so many more times, I think, than like with my cello lessons, actually. Like when I used to have a full studio of cello students, I would, I finally, after like 10 years of teaching, had like a policy that I gave people when they signed up, talked about cancellations and what you got and what you brought to your first lesson and just things that people ask me all the time. And it took me a while to get that together, but that also freed up a lot of space in my business for me to be more present in the providing the value, the service of what I'm doing. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, so learning from the previous mistakes and things like that.
It's hard. It's because actually just excuse me, I'm gonna cough. I'm gonna mute myself. The allergies are happening, and I'm sorry. If you're watching us on YouTube, I just got a puppy a few weeks ago, and so if I'm looking around, I'm just like making sure she's on Treasure Island or on her bed.
Treasure Island.
Yes, Treasure Island is a rug in the kitchen.
That's awesome.
But it's where I feed her all her treats. Anyway, but yeah, expectations and learning from your failures. And right before I got on here today, I was telling Wilson I fell asleep on the couch, and I was trying to do this meditation about reframing negative thoughts, and I kind of got in this rabbit hole on YouTube before I fell asleep about there's something in our brains that, like, when we have, it's a TED Talk, I'll have to find it and put it in the description or in the show notes, but it talks about how when we have a gain, like we have like, yay, for like 5 minutes, and then we come back down to baseline. And then when we have a loss, we're like, we could have a gain during that loss, but it's harder to get us back up to baseline after we've had that loss. Like for some reason, as a human, our brains hold on to that negative thinking first, like more easily than positive thinking. So it is a practice, which I think is really interesting. I definitely think I've spent so much time, like we talked about actually last week with Bob Berg, like how much of the inner work matters to the outer work. And so being brave enough to feel that ickiness, like when you are having these tough conversations in the midst of like what just feels like the end of the world, if you can face like what that feels like and what those feelings are trying to tell you and just move through it, it will move you. It will move through. You will move through. It's not the end of your journey, but that's hard. That's hard to remember for sure.
Definitely.
I guess. Yeah. What's another one for you?
Well, the next big one for me was I think like I look at it. So after the band broke up, I started playing solo a lot, and I kind of, put out a record under my own name. And maybe the first kind of failure was putting that EP out and having expectations that it would take my career somewhere. I don't know, wherever that it did. It moved my career forward in a sense that it was the first piece of work I had under my own name. So I was like, oh, this guy actually is doing something as an artist. But I had hired a publicist and a radio campaign for the first time ever. And so I had no idea what I was doing. And I found a publicist who did both, who was recommended by KEXP in Seattle, which is the radio station. And so I was like, oh, they're legit and they're kind of indie. So and they recommend this company. So they like working with them. So I was like, okay, I'll work with them. And I looked at their website and blah, blah, but I didn't do a ton of research, which maybe it was good or bad, but it was cool. And so I gave them, a couple grand, I think. It was $2,000 or $3,000 to do a campaign. And nothing really happened from it. It's I got played on some college radio and things like that. And I was like, oh, cool. And I got a couple pieces of press and put on a couple playlists back in the day. But at the end of the day, I was like, oh, that's about it. And the money's gone and it was over. And it was just sort of this realization of oh, okay, shoot. So again, my expectations were really high and my expectations were not met again.
And that's interesting, getting clear on those expectations. Do you want your first EP to win you a Grammy? Like, of course, like when we say it out loud like that, I mean, that could totally happen for sure. Like, I like to think big and like, you know, I mean, but I don't know. Like, I think it's really good to first define like, what is success to you? Right. We talk a lot about that, but also when that does happen, like, again, if you can face like, what were my expectations? Like, why am I so let down? Like, is this a loss? Because we could choose to see the positive in it. Like, oh my God, I just released my first EP. Like, I got these plays, I got these listens. Instead, we're like, we didn't get like the giant, you know, pie in the sky on our first.
Yeah, I don't even know what I was expecting. Right? I'm not really sure.
Me too.
I think in some way it was maybe a financial gain back, but then I was like, what am I selling? CD? Like, I don't know, you know? Yeah. I didn't really have a plan. So I think you're right. It's sort of like, I should have been like, oh, this is super cool. I got some press and blah, blah, blah. Like, this is a great start. So in a way it was a failure. In a way it was just normal run-of-the-mill releasing music stuff.
I feel like I've done that too. Like people, like I've spent thousands of dollars on getting on a Spotify playlist, whatever, some years ago, and nothing happened. It was very frustrating. I feel like, but those kind of things taught me how to see through a lot of bullshit. Like I can detect a lot of bullshit now. Now, I'm not immune to it. If you've listened to previous episodes about us, I definitely experienced a crazy, crazy thing. And like you can't imagine like going through a Ponzi scheme, like, you know, being victim, so to speak, of a Ponzi scheme and having to fight the FBI to get my intellectual property back. It's a whole thing, you know. Con men are really good at their jobs.
Yep.
But, you know, you live and you learn. And that, like, actually, that is, I think for a minute, there for me when that happened, I felt like a huge failure, and it wasn't even my fault. I had nothing to do with it. Like, but I felt like, why didn't I know? I brought, you know, like really negative self-talk, but also it's easy to like
reasonable.
Sorry.
But reasonable to say, why couldn't I have seen this coming? You know,
that was really hard.
Oh, it's all, you know, it's my fault. What could I have done? When you're like, I couldn't have done anything. You did the best you could.
Right. And that's hard to like, as someone as a, you know, control freak. And I want to know why. Like, I need to like, for me, I like to figure things out, you know? But the how, like really learning how to let go of the how has been, and like the why has been really freeing, kind of just the surrendering, because I realized like I could sit here and be pissed off about this at myself or whoever. And I could just blame folks for where I'm at, and oh my gosh, I released this record and now I can't tour it and la da da. You know, then the pandemic happened a year later. No one's touring, but I don't know. I just don't want to have that attitude. Like that doesn't feel as good as like, I don't know if this is the best way to say it, but like success is the best revenge, and not like for other people, but like for yourself. Like, yes, I didn't let that failure, like I had the quote dream, like I was signed, you know, doing all this stuff, but like, man, I really learned that like, you know what, I thought I wanted that and I had it, and I started to slowly sacrifice pieces of myself for to be nice as a woman. That's like very easy to slip into, to like, I've always been reprimanded a lot, like as a kid growing up, and like I'm loud and I have a lot of energy, and so like I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not upsetting anyone, and so that easily slipped into like my authenticity suffering, you know, and not showing up. And I think that wasn't worth the quote being able to say being signed. But you know, that doesn't mean that my team looks different. I definitely learned from that quote failure, like that I do want a team, but I want it to look different. And I learned so much. Now I have this total song registration workshop, and you know, I'm launching just different things, and my career is just more expansive than I thought it would be, even during a pandemic. Can't wait to get back on the road. But with our podcast here. So the failures can lead to really like big breaking open, you know?
Yeah, they really can. And I mean, yeah, your experience, just so some of you guys know her backstory, she was signed to this, it kind of was like a label, but it was like a manager deal, and you had a team and all this stuff. And
basically a 360. Yeah, it's publishing, deal. Label, and management.
Yeah, and then it turned out to be a Ponzi scheme, and then her music was locked up with the FBI, and she had to hire a lawyer to fight to get her music rights back and get her album back. So, like, it was crazy. Literally, it doesn't get any crazier than that. So that could be chalked up as a failure in its own way. But, like you said, you had these amazing realizations. And
so much good came out of it. I did all these music videos, I got to meet all these people, do all this stuff. So even though that shit sucked, it was incredibly expansive as well. It's like, but this just isn't the end of the journey. But man, it took me like a lot of books, a lot of discussion, a lot of therapy to, like just process that stuff. I think the biggest problem is that we're not taught that feeling is good. Like we're supposed to feel, and you've got to process because there are lessons in everything. And when we stuff it down, then we're just self-sabotaging. And but yeah, that inner work, man, really pays off.
Sure does. Yeah. So the next mistake or failure, not mistake, I did was I came to Nashville, still was doing my solo artist thing, and I hired an artist coach who ended up being a really bad fit. And so that was like a bunch of time and money, and that didn't end up working out well. But at the same time, I had gotten really into self-producing. And so I self-produced my whole first full-length record on my own.
Wow.
And like mixed it and recorded the whole thing in my bedroom at the time and put it out there. And it actually, it sounded great and everything. And then same thing though. And I did like a huge release show here in Nashville, and I was hoping to like break even or make some money or something. My expectations were there, and I ended up losing money, and I totally was like, oh my God, this is insane. And I made like a whole music video where I invited people over, and we had like wine and pizza and like a live show, and I filmed and recorded the whole show.
Cool.
So I like went over the top with this whole release. And then at the end of it, I was like, oh my God, I just spent so much money, so much time, and like I was totally burnt out. And so I didn't even tour on the record, and I just stopped. But what I did do is I kept producing and writing and creating in the studio, which is kind of what led me to where I am now. So in a way, it was like this death of the artist thing for the time being led to more production. But that was a big one. That was like,
I love what you just said, like this
tough failure,
death and rebirth, that like constant, that's just what we're constantly doing. And actually I'm reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle right now. And where I'm at in the book, she's talking about that. Like we're just constantly, if we're constantly able to just be wanting to be expanding, self-improving, maybe is the word, not quite the word I'm looking for, then like we're just always trying to create a better version of ourselves all the time. And I think that is like important part of the cycle. Like when do we learn to like let go? Like, okay, you're cool with, like, you realize like not touring that album led you to all this other stuff, like you at some point have to let go and surrender to the flow. A couple things that are really, and I think for our listeners out there, you guys should definitely pick up these books. I was just telling Wilson about these. I want to do a podcast book club episode on both of these. It's Not Your Money by Tasha Silver and Rich as Fuck by Amanda Francis. And I just love these books so much because I realized I've been looking at a lot of my failures as like they're a failure because they didn't make me X amount of money. And I realized, and this is in Tasha Silver, I believe, she talks about there's these different steps to surrendering and realizing like money is energy. It's not good or bad. It's not any stories that we have, we've tied to it. We have assigned those. We have given money that belief system. It's totally not even real, right? But she poses it as money is like of the divine, of whatever you call the source. It's just part of it. It's everywhere, and like we're conduits, and we can move through it. And there's a few steps to getting there. And she talks about how like if you feel like you're doing all the steps, you're doing all the affirmations, you're reading the prayers, you're doing the stuff, but like nothing's happening, and you realize you're just attached to the outcome. And what you have to do is completely release the outcome. And I realized that with my first launch of my Total Song Registration Workshop last year, ended 2020, I was really hoping for more attendance, to be totally, to be frank. And I was like, I like hurt my own feelings. Like, it's so silly talking about it now, even a few months later. And I was like, I could have done this better. I could have done that better to have more people. But it was exactly what it needed to be, because the people who were there were perfect for it. It was a great intimate space. Like, it was incredible. And I'm so grateful for how it did work out. And it has served just in way bigger ways than I could have thought. And it just worked out really great. But I was just really tied to, oh my God, I didn't make X amount of money by this date.
Totally.
This date I've made, like, universe, I'm making this. Okay, I'm going to work on my manifestation. I am, it's money flows easily to me. And, and it didn't do it by this time. But the outcome it's so counterintuitive, right? Like, to get what you want, you have to let go of what you want, like let go of that outcome. So, and
it is counterintuitive. And a lot of people tell you to do those things where it's like, you can't make a certain amount of money unless you know how much money you're capable of making, or all these different things. So it becomes very paradoxical.
Yeah. Or Amanda Frances talks about the same thing. Be very specific about what you want. From the style of life you want, from how much money you want to make, because you've got to be a vibrational match for the money that you want to make. You got to be able to receive, right? But identify what you want, and then take the inspired action. You can't worry about the how. And I think I know that I self-sabotage with the how constantly. I was actually just having this discussion with a friend earlier today about my perfectionism getting in the way. I'm just like, this copy isn't perfect for the website yet. Just go and post it. But if you feel inspired to take the action, we felt inspired to just start recording this podcast, and it's so awesome. And now close to 1,000 listens, so cool, or 1,000 downloads. It's so cool.
It's amazing.
But yeah, if you take the inspired action, you will get to the outcome. And as a control freak, it's hard to let go of the how, but oh my gosh, just reading these 2 books and this mind shift that's happened over the past couple of weeks for me, I just feel better.
Nice. That's
just
awesome.
Okay, I don't have to. I had a revelation, dude, because this is something I've wondered until the past couple of years. Why can't I make more money? What is wrong with me? And there's nothing wrong with me. It's just how I've been thinking about money. And I realized that there was a story growing up that I picked up that was, I had to worry about money in order to make it or have it or save it. And so I've just been trying to stop worrying.
Nice.
Just don't worry. And that's really, really hard. But I feel a little, hard. I feel like it's not a failure, just trying to do that. And it's just, as soon as I've done that, a few cool things have happened. Someone bought the workshop, and So yeah, you guys should read those books. I'll put it in the description below as well, and then we can have a book club on it.
I definitely got to read those books, because I want to have the same revelation. And I think revelations. Yeah, and to tail off, we both launched these courses at the same time, and I launched my course, what was it, 3 weeks ago now or something like that. And I also had the expectation of I'm going to get this many people to buy it and blah, blah, blah. And I had such a lower launch, and Sarah saw me the next day or 2 days after or something. And I was just down in the dumps, and it was crazy how hard it hit me. But luckily, I think it helped that I went on vacation for 2 weeks afterwards, and I just cleared my head, and I was like, I have no care in the world. But looking back on it now, I'm still oh yeah, it definitely hurts, but I'm realizing you kind of pick yourself up and you're okay, why didn't it work? I need to troubleshoot this.
It was the first time we both launched a course.
Exactly. Yeah. How are we gonna nail this thing right off the bat?
Same thing with the EP. Oh my God.
Exactly.
Or I did the same thing with my first album. I was this is it. This is gonna be I'm gonna get a manager, and I'm gonna do this, and
totally.
And I mean, I look back and I'm holy crap, that stuff didn't happen right away. I did eventually get that stuff, ended up not being the right fit, yada, yada. But in the beginning, I would have felt that was a failure. But I realized I had successful Kickstarter that made that album possible. Like,
yeah,
that was my first thing, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's if we can try to look at those failures and see, like, not to minimize or normalize like bad things that have happened to us, but to see like, oh, what good did come out of that failure? That's actually really, I think, good for our psyche.
Yeah, definitely. And for this course thing, I am still in it. Like, I have no idea. It's not even technically a failure yet, although it's verging on it again.
Oh, but you did, but that moment, yeah, like maybe not the project is
the project, you know, the project really is in its essence for the longevity of it. Like, of course, like with all these projects we have, like there is a financial component, but there is a bigger component that is like, ideally you're helping people, ideally you're putting out creativity in the world. A really great book, by the way, that I read that everyone should read is Big Magic.
Oh, I love that book so much.
It's a great book.
Oh my God, I love Liz Gilbert.
Yeah, so I read that when I was on vacation, and that was really helpful too.
Oh my God,
with, like,
what a great book to read on your vacation.
It was a good one. Yeah, I actually listened to it, so it was cool to listen to it.
Did she read it?
She read it.
Oh man,
she did,
I just
indeed.
love Elizabeth Gilbert so much.
Yeah, so that was a good one. But yeah, I don't know. What else do we want to talk about with the failures? I have a bunch more for sure.
I mean, isn't that amazing? I mean, I think it's important for everybody to realize, like, failure is just a part of it. And
it is, yeah.
And even with songwriting, I have found that, like, some of my stupidest, or what I think is stupid or dumb ideas, like, actually aren't, and then they become cool songs. So we have a tendency to be very mean to ourselves. And but yeah, just practicing seeing positives in some of the failures and just keep going. And what inspires you? Like, what gets you excited? And if you're not inspired, maybe you do need a break. Like, you know, you're talking about how bummed you were, and yeah, you put so much energy into it, but you probably were, the bummed was amplified because you were tired, you know, and you needed to go take a break. And that is like, I'm having a hard time with that right now. I'm struggling right now. My most current thing I'm feeling like a failure about is how quickly I have not moved into this house, how behind I am on everything. Cause like I usually just work from home and dictate my schedule, but now with a new puppy, we're getting used to each other and we just moved. And so I don't even have like the stuff. And then I hurt my back and I've just had to fucking slow down, and it really messes with my head a little bit. But I'm just like, okay, I'm never gonna get these puppy weeks back, like, of, you know, my dog's life. Like, I'm gonna just lay here on the couch or the floor with her as I stretch and take care of my back and enjoy this time. And that's definitely helped. Like, I'm really grateful I have her during, if I was gonna hurt my back, you know. So
yeah, well, you know, something that you're so good at, Sarah, which I actually admire, is, and all you guys listening should check this out too, is she's so good, at least I think, of doing self-care and like taking breaks. And I've been really like into that lately, of like slowing down, doing less.
So hard.
Yeah, so hard. And I'm constantly trying to be like, I don't know if you think this, but I think the 8-hour workday is totally crazy. And like, honestly, I've shifted this week to doing just 4 hours in the morning from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Of like really deep work. I also read another book that was great called Deep Work, which I highly recommend, which is all about finding your deep work hours. And I have gotten more done in the last 2 weeks by making that one shift than I feel like I've done in a long time. And then my afternoons are just a crapshoot. Like, I am just all over the place. Like, my mind is gone. Like, people are calling me. I'm looking like my ADD takes over. But I'm like, at least I got those 4 hours in where I really knocked it out of the park. And I'm like, how could someone do that for 8 hours? Like, I don't even know.
I think I'm rebelling in a way, maybe subconsciously. From like school and college and like just the grind that society tells you have to just be productive. You have to be like doing something all the time, be a cog in the machine, or you're not productive. And like rest is like a total rebellion. I would like to credit the Nap Ministry on Instagram. I've talked about her before. It's just, she is just an amazing advocate for rest. And because we have to have it, like we have to have it in order to function. And I think I'm tired of feeling burnt out or like I'm not doing enough. I mean, I'm trying to even catch myself. Like I'll start to think I'm a failure by looking at people's highlight reel on Instagram. I'm like, oh shit, I should be live streaming more. I should be doing this. And I'm like, should I, or do I just think I need to be doing that? What do I need to be doing? You know, how do I need to bring value to the world? Like, what is the service I provide? But that's really hard because I'm used to. The self-care thing is like new in the past few years. Like I've really learned since I moved to Nashville, like the hard way a bunch. But then the Ponzi scheme thing happened a few years ago, and it was like, oh, halt! You have to totally stop and take care of yourself. I had vocal trouble some years ago, and I thought like before I moved to Nashville, like, oh my God, I'm never gonna sing again. Like I have these little nodules on my throat that are appearing, and I was coaching a swim team and gigging all the time, like yelling at kids and singing all night and drinking and partying and all this stuff.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy?
Right. And like, I feel like I'm not running anymore from like whatever I wasn't processing. And like, I have to get up in the morning and let myself have a couple hours. And like my deep work is probably between like 10 and 3. Something like that. Yeah. But it's
everyone's is different.
And it takes time to get into whatever. I mean, I talk to women about this all the time. Like, I feel guilty. I took time for myself. Like, ooh, that's wild. Like we have to fuel ourselves to get through the failures, you know, like, because we have to be able to pick ourselves up. And if we don't have fuel.
And one of the greatest things about being an artist, being creative, and being self-employed is that we don't have to do the 9 to 5 if we don't want to. Like, we don't have to, like, if you're at a point in your career where you're like, okay, like I'm not doing a side job or whatever, or even if you're doing a side job, the days that you're not doing your job, like freaking do what you want, because that is the gift. That is why we're doing what we're doing. And I think maybe through all my failures, I'm starting to realize that now. Because one thing I've realized too is, and this is a new revelation in my mind in the last like couple weeks, is that why am I working so hard if I keep on quote unquote failing? Why am I working so hard to fail? Why don't I work like smart, still get to where I'm trying to go? Like, I don't need to work so hard, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. Well, how much are you just spinning your wheels? Like, how much do we just think that spinning our wheels is actually productivity?
Exactly, right.
That's what I struggle with.
So now I'm sort of like, okay, I'm definitely not working. I used to work 7 days a week because I was just like, I got to hustle. Like, I need to get ahead. And now I'm definitely not working. I'm working 5 days a week, and then I'm really trying to get down to 7 hours a day. And I'd love to get down to just like 6 hours a day or less.
Yeah.
And take Fridays off. Like, that's my goal now. Maybe we're just in our 30s, but
I mean, I just think we're having better boundaries. Like, you know, like we can do, and I think especially as musicians, and we've talked about this in other episodes too, like we cannot like just charge hourly. Like if we really charged like an hourly rate, nobody could afford us all the hours of practicing, the gear, the travel, yeah. And so we have to really, you know, focus on what we want, focus on what we're good at, and like focus on, you know, what sparks us up, what inspires us, what is that inspired action? Because that is where you're just going to find all that abundance. And but as long as we tie to, if I work this many hours a week and I get this much an hour and this is how much, you know, that's, I don't know, I think that's it's too restrictive, and it keeps people stuck in, just keeps people stuck.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Any other failures you want to talk about, Sarah?
Oh man, probably
this has been a
lots.
Cool conversation though. I feel like
I remember a very early failure that taught me a lot. I still am learning how to receive, I think. And this is where it kind of first started. Or first when I realized like, oh, I'm blocking abundance. I was in high school and I was living in the Atlanta area, and I was sitting first chair in the orchestra and cello section. And we were playing at the Atlanta Symphony Hall there. And I can't remember what it was for, but it was like a packed total. The Symphony Hall was like completely packed full of like kids or something. We were playing for a field trip. I don't know. And it was a small ensemble, and I had like a solo, and the solo was just like one long note. I didn't think it was worthy of standing up for. And as this whole audience, like everybody is clapping and stuff, and the conductor, you know, nods to me like, "Hey, stand up." I didn't stand up.
Oh, wow.
I refused to stand up. And I was like, no, like that wasn't good enough. Like like in my mind, like I fucked up. Like, you know, I was very hard on myself and very perfectionist with all that. And we got off stage, and my teacher, Mr. Kim, I still talk to him today. I love this guy. Taught me so much. He was like, don't ever do that. Like you're insulting your audience by not accepting the compliment. And then I heard that later on and put in a way when someone like said thank you, or when someone complimented me coming off stage when I first started songwriting for the first time in my like early mid 20s. I was like, oh no, I fucked up here, I messed up here. And someone was like, Sarah, just say thank you. Like, just say thank you. And I was like, oh, I'm not making myself look better by doing the other thing. You know, just say thank you. Yeah. And after a while, as I learned to say thank you, I started to believe it. And like, so receiving can be really hard. We can block abundance from ourselves because we're just stuck in like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not working enough. I'm not doing this. I'm not, you know, doing that. Whoa, you are not your thoughts either.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, that's a really good one. And that's a huge one as an artist and a creative. It's so hard to take compliments, but man, is that a good practice in receiving, of just like being open and saying like, thank you sincerely and genuinely, like, thank you. Like, I've worked really hard on that. Yeah. And you just like literally are like enjoying it. Like, that's amazing.
Why would we say, because we did literally work so hard on that. How many times did you play that over and over and over in your house?
Weird self-esteem issues.
Yeah. And I really think, just to go deep here, I really think it comes from growing up in a Southern Baptist dynamic. There's a lot in the church that like, you know, or just this humbleness, that humility that can like cross into the shadow world, you know. There's a lot of really good there, a lot of, you know, but anyway, that's where I kind of think it came from. And also being a woman, I think that also plays into it. But also we all just have our things, you know, we all have our things, we all have our experiences, we all have our traumas, and it's okay for things to not feel good sometimes. Like life isn't supposed to be all just happy all the time.
No. Yeah.
But we fail all the time. Woo!
Fail all the time. I had a crazy experience. I got hired to play banjo in an orchestra in Aspen that my banjo teacher couldn't do. So he's like literally selected me, which I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Fancy. And I went there, and the only time I could rehearse was in the dress rehearsal. And so I had literally came out on stage. We were all in full dress, like suits and everything. I'd never played with an orchestra in my life with a banjo, let alone this orchestra. And I totally like botched my solo. And it was like the same thing. It was like a solo part. It was the 3-penny waltz or something, I think. I don't know. It was Gershwin. It was really badass. And the conductor came to me. He's like, hey man, you know, like, let's just simplify this and like do this. And then for the show, I freaking got it. Yes! But the dress rehearsal had an audience, so it felt like horrible to mess that up. And it was so crazy. And then I remember the thing that reminded me of the story is that they like pointed to me as like one of the guest artists, and I was like, holy shit, I'm like a guest artist. And they like made me stand up, and I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. And I like stood up, but I also felt the same way. I was like, I literally played for like 5 seconds, like, who the fuck cares about the banjo? Like, but apparently people were like, oh, that's really cool. Like, you know, so it was a similar moment of like, you just have to own it, and then you need to honor the fact that you put in all that hard work. You know, I have noticed, now I'm not trying to jinx myself or anything, I've noticed if I've had a really shitty dress rehearsal in my life, like the performance goes great. No, it's usually true, right? You got to get the crap out.
Oh man, we could talk forever about failures.
Point is, we have all failed a lot. I'm sure you all have too.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to just keep doing it.
Yeah, and honor them. I feel like it'd be fun to have like a failure party, because even talking them out has been kind of therapeutic.
Yes.
It kind of feels like, oh yeah, actually those weren't as bad as I thought they were.
Yes.
Like, oh, and we did learn a lot from our failures.
Well, actually, you know what? If you're watching us on YouTube right now, you can drop a comment in the comment section below and let us know if you're feeling brave. Let us know, what are some of your biggest failures? You know? We could talk about, we could have a whole...
Do we have an email yet? I don't think
we do. thewealthyartistpodcast@gmail.com.
Oh yeah, shoot us an email at thewealthyartistpodcast@gmail.com with your biggest failure.
Yeah, or Instagram at thewealthyartistpodcast. And we are starting a Patreon page. We have one, and this might be a cool thing. Maybe Wilson and I have been talking about maybe like where once a month we get together and hang out with you guys, and you can join us in like on a Zoom call, and we can have like a failure party, things like that. If that is something that gets you excited, please let us know with a comment. And thanks for listening today, guys. We just love that you're here, and keep on failing and winning.
Keep on and learning.
Learning.
Failing and learning and failing and learning.
I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway.
Yeah, new song.
I ripped off that melody.
No one has to know.
For sure. That's what the podcast is for.
All right. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace out.
This was fun.